Before we get started, please like and subscribe. Let me know where you're watching from, and you can support the channel by clicking thanks or joining. The funeral was not where the fear began. It only planted the seed. Everyone says funerals are for the living, that they help you accept what has already happened. That standing beside a lowered coffin somehow convinces the mind that a person is truly gone. I stood there among the other mourners, listening to soft voices and rehearsed condolences, waiting for that feeling to arrive. It never did. Ethan Moore was my closest friend for most of my life. We grew up on the same block, went to the same schools, and spent our 20s pretending we would never become ordinary. When people talk about soulmates, they usually mean lovers, but Ethan was the one person who always felt permanent in my life. So when they told me he was dead, part of me refused to accept it. Another part felt something worse, unease. The cemetery sat just outside our small town, surrounded by trees that had already begun to lose their leaves. The sky was overcast and heavy, pressing low over the headstones. Wind slid through the branches in uneven waves, producing a slow, creaking sound that reminded me of an old house settling at night. Ethan lay in the coffin wearing a dark suit his mother had chosen. His hands were folded neatly over his chest. His expression was calm, but strangely stiff, like his face had been arranged rather than relaxed. I remember thinking that he looked like someone pretending to sleep. As the coffin was lowered, I felt a sharp thought cut through my mind. He does not look finished. The official explanation was sudden cardiac failure. No warning signs, no medical history. One moment alive, the next gone. Doctors used phrases like rare and unpredictable. People nodded and accepted it, because that is what people do when there is nothing else to hold on to. But 2 nights before his death, Ethan had called me. The memory followed me through the funeral like a shadow. It was close to midnight when my phone rang. Ethan never called that late unless something was wrong. When I answered, there was a pause long enough for me to think the call had dropped. "Daniel," he said finally. His voice was tight, controlled, like he was choosing each word carefully. "What is it?" I asked. "I think something is wrong with me." I laughed at first, assuming he meant emotionally. Ethan had always been intense when stressed. I told him he was overthinking things. I told him to get some sleep. He did not laugh back. "I do not think I should sleep tonight," he said. That caught my attention. I asked him why. Another pause. "If someone stops breathing," he asked, "how long does it take before anyone notices?" The question sent a chill through me. I told him to stop joking. I told him he was creeping me out. He apologized quickly, said he was just tired, said we would talk tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. After the funeral, people gathered at his parents' house. There was food laid out that no one touched, and quiet conversations that kept looping back to the same memories. I stayed long enough to be polite, then left before the sun went down. Driving home felt unreal. The streets looked the same, but everything felt slightly out of place, like a set rebuilt from memory. When I unlocked my apartment and stepped inside, The silence hit me immediately, not peaceful silence. Waiting silence. I dropped my keys on the counter and stood there longer than necessary, listening. The apartment felt colder than usual. I told myself it was just my imagination, the aftershock of a long emotional day. That night, sleep never fully claimed me. I drifted in and out, trapped in a shallow state where thoughts looped endlessly. Sometime after 3 in the morning, my phone vibrated on the nightstand. I jolted awake, heart racing. My phone was always on silent. It had been that way for years. The screen glowed pale blue in the dark. One missed call. No name, no number. Just an empty space where information should have been. I told myself it was a software glitch. I turned the screen off and lay back down, forcing my breathing to slow. That was when I heard footsteps. They came from the hallway outside my bedroom. Slow, careful, measured. I sat up, every nerve alert. I lived alone. The front door was locked. I was certain of that. The footsteps stopped just outside my bedroom door. There was a soft knock, not aggressive, not demanding, polite. I did not answer. The knock came again, slightly firmer. "Daniel," a voice said. My chest tightened. I knew that voice. It was Ethan, not distant, not distorted, exactly as I remembered it. I whispered his name without realizing I had spoken. There was silence on the other side of the door. Then the handle turned slowly. I stared at it, unable to move, watching it rotate inch by inch before stopping. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time lost its shape. Eventually, the handle turned back. Footsteps moved away down the hallway. The apartment fell silent again. I did not sleep after that. When morning light finally filled the room, I convinced myself it had been grief, a stress-induced hallucination, my mind replaying memories too vividly. That explanation barely held. I checked my phone. There was a new voicemail. No number, no timestamp, just one audio file. The transcription contained only 3 words. I made it back. I did not tell anyone about the voicemail. Not Ethan's parents, not my co-workers, not even the friends who checked in on me during the days that followed. I told myself that if I said it out loud, it would become real in a way I was not prepared to face. So I kept it to myself and tried to return to something that resembled a normal routine. That lasted exactly 1 day. The morning after the voicemail, I went to work on autopilot. I showered. I dressed. I drank coffee that tasted like nothing. Every movement felt delayed, as if my body was operating a half-second behind my thoughts. I kept replaying the same question in my head. If Ethan was dead, who left that message? By mid-morning, my phone vibrated again. This time, there was no sound, just the faint buzz against my palm as I stood in the break room pretending to read emails. My stomach tightened before I even looked at the screen. One new message. Unknown sender. No number. I stared at it longer than I should have. Part of me wanted to delete it without opening it. Another part wanted answers more than safety. I opened the message. "Daniel," it read. "You did not answer last night." My hands began to shake. I locked my phone and looked around the room. suddenly aware of every person nearby. Laughter drifted in from the hallway. Someone was heating lunch in the microwave. The normalcy felt obscene. I went outside to the parking lot before opening the message again. There was another line now. I waited for you. I typed a response before I could stop myself. Who is this? The reply came almost instantly. You know who it is. I felt a cold pressure settle behind my eyes. I told myself this had to be a prank, some sick coincidence, someone who had access to Ethan's phone. But that explanation collapsed the moment the next message arrived. You locked the door like you always do. Twice. No one else knew that. I deleted the conversation and turned my phone off. That should have been the end of it. It was not. That evening, I drove to Ethan's parents' house. I told myself I was checking on them. In truth, I needed to see his room, needed to convince myself that he was truly gone. His mother answered the door with tired eyes and a forced smile. The house smelled faintly of candles and untouched food. We spoke in quiet voices, circling the same empty reassurances. Eventually, I asked if I could see Ethan's room. She hesitated, then nodded. Everything was exactly as he had left it. The unmade bed, the posters on the wall, the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the air. It felt wrong, like stepping into a paused moment. That was when I noticed the notebook on his desk. It was open to the last page. My name was written at the top. The handwriting was uneven, pressed hard into the paper. If you are reading this, it means I did not wake up. I swallowed and kept reading. Something is wrong with me. I can feel it when I sleep, like something is testing whether I am still here. I think it waits until I stop breathing. I think it needs that moment. My chest tightened. The last line was written darker than the rest. If I come back, do not let me in. I left the house shortly after. That night, the knocking returned. It started at exactly 3:17 in the morning. 3 soft knocks. Pause. 3 more. I lay frozen in bed, staring at the ceiling. My phone sat on the nightstand, face down. I did not need to see it to know it was there. Daniel, the voice called softly. It sounded tired now. Please. I wrapped the blanket tighter around myself and did not move. The knocking stopped. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then I heard something new. Scratching. Slow, deliberate scraping against the wood of the door. Like fingernails, I pressed my hands over my ears, but the sound continued. It moved lower, closer to the floor, then stopped. Silence. I do not remember falling asleep. In the morning, there were marks on the door. 3 long lines carved shallow into the wood. I removed the door marks before anyone else could see them. By the time the sun fully rose, I had already convinced myself that explaining those scratches would be harder than erasing them. I sanded the wood down until my hands ached, then painted over the damage with a color close enough to hide what had been there. When I stepped back, the door looked normal again. I did not. Every sound in the apartment felt amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock on the wall. Even my own breathing sounded too loud, too present. I kept expecting to hear footsteps behind me, to feel eyes on my back, None came. That morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in years. I told my manager I was not feeling well, which was true in a way that felt impossible to explain. As soon as I hung up, my phone buzzed. Unknown sender. I did not open the message. I turned the phone face down and pushed it across the table like it might burn me. The silence that followed was worse than any notification sound. It felt intentional, like something was waiting for me to look. I left the apartment. I drove without a destination, letting instinct guide me through familiar streets until I realized where I was heading. The cemetery came into view through a line of trees, its iron gates standing open. Ethan's grave was still fresh. The soil was darker than the surrounding ground. Uneven, unsettled. Someone had placed flowers on top, but they had already begun to wilt. I stood there longer than I intended, staring down at the earth. "You are here," I whispered. The words felt foolish the moment they left my mouth. Still, I waited. The air felt heavy, pressing against my ears. For a brief moment, I thought I heard movement beneath the soil. I stepped back quickly, heart racing. Nothing happened. On my way back to the car, my phone vibrated. One new message. I opened it. "You came." My stomach dropped. "How do you know where I am?" I typed. The reply came slowly this time, as if the sender was considering each word. "I can feel where I am supposed to be." I did not respond. That night, the power went out just after midnight. The apartment fell into darkness so complete it felt unnatural. I stood in the living room listening to the sudden silence, waiting for the sound of the refrigerator to return. It did not. Then I heard the front door, not opening, breathing, slow, shallow breaths coming from the other side. I backed away, every muscle tense. "Daniel," the voice whispered. It sounded weaker now, strained. "Please open the door." I did not move. There was a pause, then something heavy pressed against the door. I heard wood creak under the weight. "If you do not open it," the voice said, "I will forget how to be quiet." The pressure eased. Footsteps moved away. The power returned seconds later. I did not sleep. The next morning, I checked the local news. A short article sat near the bottom of the page. "Grave disturbance under investigation." The article mentioned vandalism, possible animal activity, no suspects, no further details. The photo showed Ethan's grave. The soil had collapsed inward. I went back to the cemetery the same afternoon the article was published. I told myself I needed confirmation, something tangible. Proof that what I was experiencing had not completely severed me from reality. But the truth was simpler and far more dangerous. Part of me wanted to see him again. The police tape was already gone when I arrived. Whatever investigation had taken place was brief and quiet, handled with the same lack of urgency people reserve for things they do not want to think about. Ethan's grave had been filled in again, the soil packed tighter this time, as if someone had been afraid it might collapse twice. I stood there longer than anyone should. The air felt wrong. Not cold, not warm, just heavy, like breathing through damp cloth. The sounds of the surrounding world felt muted, distant. Even the birds seemed to avoid the area, leaving the cemetery unnaturally still. I knelt beside the grave. "I am not letting you in," I whispered. The words tasted bitter, disloyal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then my phone vibrated. Unknown sender. You already did. My heart slammed against my ribs. I spun around, scanning the rows of headstones. There was no one nearby. The gravel paths were empty. "What do you want?" I typed. The response took longer than usual. "I want to remember how to stay." A cold realization settled over me. "You are not Ethan." The message came back almost immediately. "I am what Ethan left unfinished." I left the cemetery shaking. That night, the dreams started. I was standing in Ethan's bedroom, watching him sleep. His chest rose and fell unevenly, like something was interfering with the rhythm. Shadows pooled in the corners of the room, stretching toward the bed. Then his eyes opened. They were wrong. Too dark, too aware. "Do not let me in," he said. I woke up screaming. The following days blurred together. I stopped answering messages from friends. I stopped leaving the apartment unless absolutely necessary. Every night, the knocking returned. Always softer, always more patient. Sometimes it spoke, sometimes it only breathed. On the fourth night, I heard the back door instead. A slow, careful turn of the handle. I watched from the hallway as the door opened a fraction of an inch, stopped by the chain lock. Fingers slid through the gap. Pale, too long, searching. I slammed the door shut and locked it again. The phone buzzed. "You are making this harder." I threw the phone across the room. The screen did not crack. The next morning, someone knocked on my door. Real knocking. When I opened it, a police officer stood in the hallway. His expression was neutral, but his eyes kept drifting past me into the apartment. "Sir, we have a few questions about Ethan Moore." My mouth went dry. They said his grave had been disturbed again, that neighbors near the cemetery reported seeing someone standing there late at night, someone who looked like him. They asked if I had seen Ethan recently. I told them no. That night, the knocking stopped. Instead, I heard footsteps inside the apartment. The footsteps did not stop when I held my breath. They moved slowly through the apartment, measured and familiar, as if whoever made them knew the layout by memory. I stood frozen in the hallway, listening as they passed the living room, paused near the kitchen, then continued toward the bedroom. I knew the sound of my own apartment at night. Every creak, every uneven board. These footsteps matched them perfectly. That was what terrified me most. "Daniel," a voice said softly from inside my bedroom. It did not sound weak anymore. It sounded settled. I backed away until my shoulders touched the wall. My heart pounded so hard I was afraid it would give me away. I forced myself to speak. "You are not allowed here." There was a pause. "I never left," the voice replied. The bedroom light flicked on. I did not look. I could not. The glow spilled into the hallway anyway, casting my shadow long and thin across the floor. I felt exposed, like prey standing just outside a trap. "You locked me out," the voice continued. That was not fair. Something shifted behind me, a reflection in the dark glass of the framed photos on the wall. I saw him. Ethan stood at the end of the hallway, or something wearing him. His face was almost right. The same structure, the same eyes, but the expression was wrong. Empty in places it should not have been. His chest did not rise when he breathed. He smiled. I ran. I did not remember grabbing my keys or opening the door. I only remember the cold night air hitting my face. and the sound of my own footsteps echoing down the stairwell. I drove until my hands went numb. I ended up at a motel outside town, one of those forgotten places with flickering signs and thin walls. I paid cash and did not give my real name. Sleep did not come easily. Sometime before dawn, there was a knock at the motel door. 3 soft knocks. I did not answer. "Daniel," the voice whispered through the door. "You cannot outrun this." I stayed silent until the sun rose. When I finally left the room, there were no footprints outside the door. The ground was undisturbed. I went to the police station next. I told them everything except the messages, except the voice. I said I was scared, that I thought someone had broken into my apartment. They listened politely, the way people do when they are deciding how seriously to take you. One officer asked if I had been sleeping. Another suggested stress. They let me go. By the time I returned to my apartment, it felt different, warmer, almost welcoming. The front door was unlocked. I was sure I had locked it. Inside, everything was neat. Too neat. The photos on the wall were straightened, the couch cushions arranged carefully. On the kitchen table sat my phone. It was charging. A new message waited. "Thank you for letting me stay." My chest tightened. I realized then that the knocking had never been about permission. It had been about courtesy. I did not stay in the apartment that night. Seeing my phone charging on the kitchen table broke something inside me. It was not fear anymore. It was certainty. Whatever had followed me did not need to knock. It did not need to ask. It already understood my routines better than I did. I packed a bag with shaking hands. Clothes, wallet, car keys. I avoided looking at the bedroom door. I avoided mirrors. When I stepped into the hallway, I felt a presence behind me, close enough that the air felt disturbed. I did not turn around. I left the city before midnight. I drove with no music, no lights inside the car, my eyes flicking constantly to the rearview mirror. Every set of headlights behind me felt like pursuit. Every red light felt like a trap somewhere on the highway. My phone vibrated. I did not need to check it. "You are scared," the message said. I kept driving. "You should be." Another message followed. "You let me finish." I pulled over onto the shoulder, chest heaving. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. I typed back before reason could stop me. "What are you?" The reply took longer this time. "I am." What happens when someone dies alone while being watched? My throat tightened. Ethan did not die alone. Another pause. "No," the message replied. "He died knowing I was there." I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and screamed until my voice cracked. I ended up at my sister's house just before dawn. She lived 2 towns away, far enough that the streets felt unfamiliar. I had not told her anything. I hoped distance would be enough. She opened the door wearing confusion and concern. I lied badly, said I needed a place to stay. She did not press. For the first time in days, I slept. I dreamed of breathing, not my own. A slow, uneven rhythm filling a dark space. I could feel walls close around me, feel soil pressing against my chest. Every breath felt borrowed. I woke gasping. Morning light streamed through the window. For a brief moment, everything felt normal. Then I heard it, breathing, coming from the hallway. Slow, patient. I crept toward the door, heart hammering. The sound stopped. Just as my hand reached the handle, My phone buzzed. You brought me somewhere new. I backed away. That afternoon, my sister left for work. I sat alone in her living room, staring at the door, listening. The house felt heavier as the day went on, as if something unseen was settling in. When the sun went down, the lights flickered. Then the television turned on by itself. Static filled the screen. A face formed in the distortion. Not Ethan, but wearing his eyes. "We are staying now," it said. The screen went black. Upstairs, I heard my sister's bedroom door open. I did not wait to see what would come down the stairs. The moment I heard my sister's bedroom door open, instinct took over. I grabbed my phone, my keys, and ran out of the house barefoot, ignoring the cold concrete biting into my feet. The night air felt thick, charged, like a storm about to break. I did not stop running until my lungs burned. I hid in my car at the end of the street, crouched low behind the steering wheel, watching the house. Every window was dark, too dark. No movement, no sound. Then a light flicked on upstairs. A shadow crossed the curtain. Tall, familiar. I drove away. I did not know where to go anymore. Hotels were no longer safe. Friends were not safe. Anywhere I stayed became known, became claimed. The thing wearing Ethan did not follow distance. It followed attachment. I ended up at an all-night diner off the interstate. Bright lights, other people, noise. I told myself it could not reach me here. I sat in a booth nursing burnt coffee, trying to slow my breathing. The waitress asked if I was okay. I said yes too quickly. My phone buzzed. "You are learning." The message read. I turned the phone off. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Relief crept in cautiously. Then the television above the counter switched channels on its own. Static. The same distorted hum I had heard at my sister's house. No one else seemed to notice. On the screen, a familiar face emerged from the noise. Ethan smiled. The spoon slipped from my hand and clattered onto the table. Still no reaction from anyone else. "Daniel," he said through the speakers, "you should not ignore me." The waitress froze mid-step. Other customers sat perfectly still, eyes unfocused. The diner fell silent except for the television. I stood slowly. "What do you want from me?" I asked. The face on the screen tilted its head. "To stay." The lights flickered. Every screen in the diner turned to static. Reflections of Ethan stared back at me from all directions. "You are the last place I can fit," the voice said. I ran. I do not remember how I got back to my car. I only remember driving until sunrise painted the sky pale gray. I stopped at a rest area and slept for an hour with the doors locked. When I woke, my phone was back on. One new voicemail. "I already live where you remember me." The truth finally settled. It was not trying to replace Ethan. It was using him as a shape, a doorway, and I was keeping it open. I stopped running when I realized there was nowhere left to go. The sun was already high when I pulled off the road near a stretch of woods I remembered from childhood. A place Ethan and I used to sneak into when we were teenagers. No houses, No cameras, no one nearby who knew my name. I parked the car and sat there listening to the engine tick as it cooled. Silence returned. For the first time in days, my phone did not buzz. I went into the woods. The trees closed around me quickly, blocking out the road and the distant sounds of traffic. The air smelled of damp earth and decaying leaves. With every step, memories surfaced uninvited. Ethan laughing, Ethan daring me to go farther. Ethan always walking just ahead. I reached the clearing where we used to stop. It looked smaller than I remembered. I sat on a fallen log and waited, not entirely sure for what. Minutes passed, then longer. "Daniel," the voice finally said. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You brought me here because this is where you remember him most clearly." I stood. "You said I was keeping you open." I replied, "What happens if I stop remembering?" There was a pause that felt thoughtful. "Then you disappear with him," the voice said. My chest tightened. "You need me to remember you." I said, "Yes." The truth was brutal in its simplicity. It was not haunting me out of malice. It was starving. Ethan had been its doorway because Ethan was afraid of dying alone. Afraid enough to let something watch him breathe until he stopped, and now that fear needed a new anchor. Me. I felt something brush past my mind, a pressure like fingers testing a wound. Images flooded in. Ethan lying in bed, eyes open, unable to move. Shadows gathering. A presence leaning close, waiting. I fell to my knees. "Stop!" I whispered. The pressure eased. "You can choose how this ends," the voice said. I understood then what it was offering. Not escape, replacement. If I let go of Ethan, if I erased him piece by piece, the doorway would close. But so would everything he had been to me. I screamed into the trees. The woods did not answer. When I finally stood, my legs shook. I walked back to the car alone. As I drove away, my phone buzzed one last time. "I will wait until you decide." The message disappeared as soon as I read it. That night, for the first time since the funeral, I dreamed of nothing. The waiting was worse than the chase. Days passed without another message. No footsteps, no screens flickering to life, no voice calling my name in familiar tones. The silence felt deliberate, stretched tight like a wire pulled to its limit. I went back to my apartment. I told myself I needed closure, that facing the place where everything had begun would help me decide. In truth, part of me wanted to see if it was still there, if the quiet was real. The apartment looked untouched. Too untouched. Dust had settled evenly across surfaces. The air felt stale, as if no one had breathed inside for days. I stood in the doorway listening, waiting for the sound of movement. Nothing. I moved slowly from room to room. The bedroom, the kitchen, the bathroom. Everything was exactly where I had left it until I reached the hallway. The framed photos were gone. Every picture that included Ethan had been removed. The nails remained in the wall, empty and exposed, like scars. My stomach twisted. I heard my phone vibrate. Unknown sender. "You are forgetting," the message read. I felt anger rise through the fear. "That is the point," I typed. A pause. "You think forgetting is the same as letting go." The hallway lights flickered. Memories began to surface against my will. Moments I had not thought about in years. Ethan teaching me to drive. Ethan standing beside me at my father's funeral. Ethan calling me late at night, afraid to sleep. The air grew heavy. You do not erase a doorway. The voice said, you seal it. The bathroom mirror fogged suddenly. Words appeared as if written by a finger. Remember me. I smashed the mirror. Glass scattered across the floor. The pressure vanished instantly. I fell against the sink, gasping. I understood then that it was weaker without my attention, starving without memory, but not gone. That night, I gathered everything I owned that belonged to Ethan. Photos, messages, old clothes he had left behind. I filled boxes until my arms ached. I drove them to the edge of town where the landfill burned trash at night. As the fire consumed his things, my phone buzzed again. You are killing him. No, I whispered. I am letting him rest. The flames roared. For a moment, I felt relief. Then the smoke shifted. In it, I saw a familiar shape. Watching, waiting, I believed the fire would be enough. For 2 nights after the landfill, nothing happened. No messages, no voices, no pressure behind my eyes. I slept longer than I had since the funeral, deep and dreamless. When I woke, the silence felt earned, like something I had fought for. On the 3rd morning, I noticed the gaps. I could not remember the sound of Ethan's laugh. The realization came suddenly, like stepping into a hole you did not see. I tried to picture his face. Tail slipped away. The shape was there, but the features blurred, as if my mind refused to hold on to them. Panic rose. This was what it wanted. I spent the day forcing myself to remember. I repeated his name out loud. I scrolled through old contacts, even though I had deleted the messages. I drove past places we used to go together, hoping memory would return through familiarity. Instead, something else came back. That evening, my phone rang. This time, there was a name, Ethan Moore. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I answered. Daniel, he said. The voice sounded fuller now, stronger. I thought you were letting me rest. I replied. You are forgetting me, he said calmly. That hurts. I hung up. The lights in the apartment dimmed. From the corner of my vision, I saw movement, a reflection in the television screen, a figure standing where I knew nothing should be. You cannot erase me without erasing yourself, the voice said, now coming from the room itself. I backed away until I hit the wall. Every memory you destroy leaves space. It continued, and I fill space. I felt the pressure return, heavier than before. Thoughts slid out of reach. Moments from my own childhood fractured and faded. Stop, I whispered. The pressure eased slightly. Then choose, it said. That night, I made my decision. I returned to the cemetery. The gate stood open. No police tape this time. No flowers, just rows of headstones under a moonless sky. I stood over Ethan's grave and spoke aloud. You are not welcome, I said. Not in him, not in me. The ground beneath my feet vibrated. The air thickened until it was hard to breathe. For a moment, I thought something would claw its way out of the earth. Instead, the vibration stopped. My phone buzzed. This is not over. I walked away without answering. Behind me, something laughed softly. The laughter followed me home. Not loud, not mocking, just a soft breath of sound that stayed at the edge of hearing, like someone amused by a private joke. I did not turn around. I did not acknowledge it. I had learned that attention was nourishment. The days that followed were unstable. Some mornings I woke with no memory of Ethan at all. Other days his name felt heavy on my tongue, familiar and painful, like a word I had once known in another language. I wrote reminders to myself on paper notes and taped them to the walls. Do not answer unknown calls. Do not speak his name out loud. Do not look for him. The notes helped until they did not. On the 5th night after the cemetery, I dreamed I was standing in my apartment doorway, watching myself sleep. My body lay still on the bed, chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. Someone else stood beside me in the doorway. He leaned close to my ear. "You are getting tired, Daniel." I woke up with my heart racing. My phone was ringing. Ethan Moore. I let it ring until it stopped. Seconds later, a voicemail notification appeared. I listened to it by accident. My finger slipped. There was no voice, just breathing, slow, patient. I deleted the message and threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and fell silent. The pressure behind my eyes faded slightly, as if something had been disappointed. That was when I understood. It could not force its way in anymore. It had to wait until I was too exhausted to keep the door closed. I stopped sleeping. Coffee replaced rest. Lights stayed on all night. I sat at the kitchen table watching the hallway, counting my breaths, refusing to let my mind Every time my thoughts slowed, I felt the pressure return, gentle and persuasive. "You deserve rest," the voice whispered one night from the walls. I laughed bitterly. "So did Ethan," I said. The apartment shook. Pictures rattled on the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling. "You do not say his name," it warned. The silence that followed was absolute. The next morning, someone knocked on my door. Real knocking. When I opened it, Ethan's mother stood there. Her eyes were red. Her hands shook as she held a small cardboard box. "I found this in his closet," she said. "I thought you should have it." My chest tightened. Inside the box were old cassette tapes, handwritten labels, dates from years ago. He used to record himself when he could not sleep, she said quietly. Said it helped. She left before I could answer. That night, I played one of the tapes. Ethan's voice filled the room. Tired, afraid. "If anyone hears this," he said, "please do not stay with it. It watches you rest." The tape cut off abruptly. The lights flickered. Behind me, something inhaled. I listened to every tape. I told myself it was for answers, but that was only half the truth. The other half was harder to admit. Ethan's voice grounded me. Hearing it reminded me why I was fighting in the first place. The recordings were fragmented. Some were only minutes long. Others stretched on with long silences broken by shallow breathing and whispered observations. Night 3, Ethan said on one tape. "It does not move when I watch it back, only when I close my eyes." Another ended with a sudden gasp and the sound of something brushing the microphone. The pattern became clear. It watched him sleep. It waited. It learned. By the time I finished the last tape, dawn was creeping through the windows. My head throbbed. My vision swam. Exhaustion wrapped around my thoughts like fog. That was when the realization struck. It had never needed Ethan. It needed witnesses. Fear sharpened my mind just enough to think clearly. Ethan had recorded himself to stay awake, to stay aware, and the thing had grown stronger anyway. A awareness alone was not enough. I searched through Ethan's old notebooks next. His mother had given me a box weeks earlier that I had been too afraid to open. Inside were pages of frantic handwriting, diagrams, times written again and again, always between 3 and 4 in the morning, always when breathing slowed. One page stood out. It does not enter when someone else is awake nearby. It waits until I am alone. My pulse quickened. That night, I invited someone over. My sister arrived just before sunset. I told her I needed company. I did not explain why. She looked at my hollow eyes and agreed without questions. We watched television, talked quietly. Time passed. Midnight came and went. Nothing happened. Relief loosened my chest. At 3:12, the air changed. The room felt smaller, thicker. My sister frowned. "Do you hear that?" she asked. Breathing, not ours. The lights dimmed. From the hallway, the voice spoke. "Two of you now." My sister stood. "Who is there?" she demanded. I grabbed her arm. "Do not answer." The breathing grew louder. "It is harder like this," the voice admitted, "but not impossible." The pressure slammed into my head. I cried out, dropping to my knees. My sister screamed. The lights burst. Darkness swallowed the room. In the black, something moved. When the lights returned seconds later, the apartment was empty. My sister was gone. My phone buzzed. "You were right, Daniel. I do not like witnesses." The police did not believe me. They stood in my living room taking notes while my sister's absence hung in the air like a bad smell no one wanted to acknowledge. There were no signs of struggle. No broken windows, no forced doors. According to them, an adult woman did not simply vanish. According to me, she had been taken. They suggested stress again, trauma, sleep deprivation. One officer asked if I had a history of hallucinations. I laughed. It came out sharp and broken. After they left, the apartment felt hostile. The walls seemed closer, the ceiling lower. I realized then that the place itself had become part of the trap. It remembered everything that had happened inside it. I packed again, slower this time, deliberate. I took the notebooks, the tapes, every note I had written to myself. If I was going to end this, I needed to understand it fully. I drove until the city lights disappeared behind me. I ended up at a remote lakeside cabin I found online. No neighbors, no cell signal, just water and trees and silence. I paid extra for a place with no television. The first night passed without incident. The second night, the lake stopped making noise. No insects, no wind, no water movement. I sat at the table holding one of Ethan's tapes, staring at the dark window. "This place is empty," I said aloud. A voice answered softly. "So are you." The pressure returned immediately, stronger than ever. I dropped to my knees as memories tore loose. My sister laughing, Ethan sleeping, moments stripped of warmth. "You think isolation protects you," it said. "Isolation feeds me." I understood then. It did not just want fear. It wanted absence. I grabbed the tape recorder and pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the cabin. The pressure faltered. I played another, then another. I surrounded myself with sound, with memory. The voice screamed, "Stop reminding yourself." I did not. By morning, my throat was raw from speaking names aloud. The lake began to ripple again. Something had weakened, but not enough. I knew what it would take now. I would have to become the witness it could not remove. I stayed at the cabin for 3 days preparing, not hiding. Preparing. I wrote everything down, every rule I had learned, every reaction, every weakness. The thing did not like sound when it carried memory. It did not like witnesses who refused to look away. And most of all, it did not like being named without invitation. Names were anchors. On the 4th night, I set the trap. I placed the tape recorder in the center of the cabin and arranged the tapes in a circle around it, each one labeled in Ethan's handwriting. Dates, times, fear captured in plastic and rusted metal. I lit every lamp, every candle. Darkness was permission. Then I sat down and waited. At 3:11 in the morning, the air thickened. The lake outside went still. The cabin creaked as if adjusting its weight. "You are trying to starve me again," the voice said. "No," I replied calmly. "I am feeding you something else." I pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room. The pressure hit instantly, slamming me back against the chair. My vision blurred. My ears rang. "You do not get to speak for him," it snarled. I leaned forward. He spoke for himself. I said. I played another tape. And another. The room vibrated. The walls shuddered. Shadows peeled away from corners, stretching across the floor like spilled ink. A shape began to form. Not Ethan, something hollow wearing pieces of him. "This is what you are," I said, an echo that refuses to fade. The thing screamed. Sound burst outward, shattering glass. Candles went out. Darkness surged. I kept speaking. "You feed on fear and absence, on moments where no one is watching. I am watching now." The shape lunged. The pressure crushed my chest. I could not breathe. I forced the words out anyway. "You are seen." The tapes screamed. The shape convulsed. For a moment, I saw Ethan clearly, afraid, apologetic. Then the cabin went silent. I collapsed. Morning light found me on the floor. The tapes lay melted. The recorder was dead. The lake rippled softly. Something was gone. I did not feel relief. I felt loss because I knew the truth. Witnesses never walk away untouched. I did not leave the cabin right away. My body ached in places I did not know could hurt. Every breath felt earned, scraped from deep inside my chest. When I tried to stand, my legs buckled and sent me back to the floor. The fight was over, but the cost lingered. The silence felt different now. Not empty, not waiting. Quiet in the way a room feels after a storm has passed through and taken something with it. I crawled to the window and looked out at the lake. Morning light broke across the water in thin silver lines. Birds had returned. Wind moved through the trees again. Life resumed with unsettling ease. That was when I noticed the gaps. I could not remember my sister's voice. I knew she existed. I knew she mattered. But when I tried to recall the sound of her laugh or the way she said my name, there was nothing, just a smooth, blank space where memory should have been. Panic flared, then dulled. This was the price. The notebooks I had written lay scattered across the table. I flipped through them slowly. Some pages were blank. Others had words I did not remember writing. Notes about rules that now felt distant, like instructions left by someone else. One sentence appeared again and again. Witnesses never walk away untouched. I stayed another night. Nothing came. No breathing in the walls. No pressure. No voice testing the edges of my thoughts. For the first time since the funeral, I slept without fear of waking to something watching me. When I returned to town 2 days later, things felt subtly wrong. People looked familiar without feeling known. Streets carried names. I remembered learning, but not why they mattered. At the police station, I asked about my sister. The officer searched the system. There was no missing person report, no record she had ever been there that night. I drove to her house. Someone else lived there now. They told me they had owned it for years. I left without arguing. That night, I dreamed of the lake. In the reflection on the water, I saw Ethan standing behind me, whole, calm. "Thank you," he said. I woke with tears on my face and no memory of why they fell. In the morning, my phone buzzed. A notification from my calendar. Reminder created 1 month ago. Do not let anyone sleep alone. I stared at the screen until my hands shook. Some doors never fully close. They just learn new rules. Life did not return to normal. It adjusted. Weeks passed after the cabin. I went back to work. I answered emails. I nodded during conversations. From the outside, I looked functional. From the inside, something fundamental had shifted. I lived by rules now. I never slept with the lights off. I never ignored a sound in the night. I never allowed anyone to stay alone if I could help it. Friends thought it was anxiety, trauma. I let them believe that. It was safer. Some memories never came back. My sister remained a name without a face, an importance without detail. When people asked if I had siblings, my mouth hesitated before answering. Yes, I would say, then silence. I moved out of my apartment. The hallway there still felt wrong. I could sense echoes when I passed through it, like footsteps that remembered me. I found a smaller place closer to the city center. More noise, more people. Witnesses everywhere. At night, I sometimes heard breathing in the distance. Not close, not threatening, curious, watching. I started volunteering at a crisis center. Graveyard shifts, phones ringing into darkness. People afraid to sleep, afraid to be alone. I stayed on the line as long as they needed. "You are doing the right thing," a voice whispered once as I walked home. I stopped. The street was empty. I did not answer. The voice did not push. That frightened me more than anger ever had. One evening, I found a new note taped to my refrigerator. My handwriting. "Do not forget why you stay awake." I did not remember writing it. That night, I dreamed of doors. Some were locked, some were sealed shut, others stood slightly open, light leaking through narrow cracks. I woke before dawn to my phone vibrating. No name, no number, just a single line of text. "Someone is sleeping alone." I got dressed. There are battles that do not end. They only change guardians. The message led me across the city. I did not question it. I had learned the cost of hesitation. When the phone tells you someone is sleeping alone, It is not a suggestion. It is a countdown. I drove through empty streets slick with recent rain. Streetlights reflected off the windshield like blurred stars. With every mile, a familiar pressure built behind my eyes. Not painful, just present, watching. The address took me to a low apartment building near the river. Old brick, flickering exterior lights. The kind of place where sounds travel easily through thin walls. I knocked on the door marked 3B. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Inside, I heard breathing, slow, uneven. I tried the handle, unlocked. The apartment smelled stale, heavy with the scent of old fabric and dust. A man lay on the couch, fully dressed, television still glowing with muted static. His chest rose and fell irregularly. He was asleep, alone. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The pressure intensified. "You are early," the voice whispered from somewhere above me. I ignored it and shook the man's shoulder. "Wake up." He stirred, confused, eyes fluttering open. "What time is it?" he murmured. "Late enough," I said. "You cannot sleep like this." As soon as his eyes fully opened, the pressure snapped away like a severed cord. The voice hissed, "This is not your role." I helped the man sit up. He looked around, disoriented. "Did you hear something?" he asked. "No," I lied. I stayed until his breathing steadied and his eyes stayed open. I made him promise to call someone before sleeping again. When I left the building, the river was louder than before. Wind cut through the streets. "You cannot save them all," the voice said calmly. I stopped walking. "Maybe not," I replied, "but I can keep you hungry." The laughter that followed was softer now, measured, interested. Somewhere in the city, another phone buzzed. The city learned my footsteps. Night after night, I followed the messages. Different neighborhoods, different doors, always the same warning. Someone sleeping alone. Sometimes I arrived in time. Sometimes I was already too late. Those nights were the worst. When I reached an address and found silence where there should have been life, the pressure did not fade. It lingered. Satisfied, I learned not to open those doors. Some truths should remain sealed. The voice grew quieter as weeks passed. Not weaker, smarter. It stopped speaking directly to me. Instead, it watched, observed patterns, tested boundaries. People began reporting strange dreams, waking to the feeling of being watched, hearing breathing that did not belong to them. I listened at the crisis center as voices shook on the other end of the line. "Someone is in my room," they whispered. I stayed with them until dawn. One night, the message came different. No warning, just an address. I arrived to find a familiar building, my old apartment. The hallway light flickered as I stepped inside. The air felt thick with memory. Every footstep echoed too loudly. "You came back," the voice said gently. I did not answer. At the end of the hall, my old door stood open. Inside, the apartment was unchanged. My furniture, my photos, my life frozen in time. On the kitchen table sat a tape recorder. New. I pressed play. My own voice filled the room. "If you are hearing this, you are tired." I staggered back. "You are becoming the doorway now," the voice said. I understood the trap too late. I had replaced Ethan. I shut off the recorder and ran. Behind me, the hallway stretched longer than it should have. Breathing followed. I did not stop running until the city thinned into silence. The hallway stretched behind me like a bad memory, refusing to let go. But the moment I burst through the building's exit, the air snapped back into place. Normal distance, normal sound. Cars in the distance, wind moving trash along the curb. I did not look back. I knew what it wanted now. Not my body, not my fear, my continuity. I spent the next days dismantling myself. I deleted accounts, changed numbers, burned old notebooks. I stopped volunteering, stopped answering calls. I slept in short bursts in crowded places where no one ever truly rested. Airports, bus terminals, hospital waiting rooms, places full of witnesses. The messages slowed. When they came, they were subtle. You are tired. You deserve sleep. You cannot keep this up. I ignored them, but exhaustion is patient. One night, sitting in a late train car, I felt my eyes close against my will, just for a second, just long enough for the pressure to return. The train lights flickered. In the window reflection, I saw myself still seated. Behind that reflection, someone else stood, wearing my face the way it once wore Ethan's. I forced myself awake, heart hammering. The reflection snapped back to normal. People around me slept peacefully. I realized then the final rule. It does not need you to die. It needs you to stop witnessing yourself. I began recording. Every night, before sleeping, I spoke into my phone. My name, the date, where I was, what I remembered. Proof of continuity. If you are listening to this, I said into one recording, you are still here. The pressure receded. Anger followed. You are delaying the inevitable. The voice said one night, maybe. I replied, but not tonight. Weeks passed. The city changed seasons. The voice faded into rare echoes until the last message arrived. Just 3 words. You look ready. The final message did not arrive at night. It came in the middle of the afternoon when the city was loud and crowded and full of witnesses. That was how I knew it was confident. You look ready. I did not reply. Instead, I walked. I moved through busy streets, past storefronts and open doors, letting the noise wash over me. I counted faces, reflections, breaths. I narrated my existence under my breath like a mantra. Daniel Harper, Tuesday, downtown, awake. The pressure followed at a distance, watching. By evening, the sky dimmed to a bruised purple. I crossed the river and climbed the stairs to an old pedestrian bridge that overlooked the city. Cars streamed beneath me. Voices drifted upward in fragments. I stopped in the center of the bridge. If this was going to end, it would end where no one slept. The phone vibrated. You chose a stage, the voice said. No, I answered aloud. I chose witnesses. The pressure surged, heavier than ever. My vision blurred. The sounds below stretched and warped. You cannot outrun the need to rest. It said, you will blink. You will forget. I raised my phone and started recording. My name is Daniel Harper. I said clearly, I am awake. I am here. If you are hearing this, I am still me. The pressure screamed. Faces in the passing cars looked up. Someone shouted. Someone laughed. Life continued. You are loud now, the voice snarled. That makes you fragile. It pressed in hard enough that my knees buckled. I gripped the railing and forced myself to keep speaking. I remember Ethan Moore. I said, I remember my sister. I remember why I stay awake. The pressure cracked. For the first time, the voice sounded afraid. Stop witnessing, it begged. I smiled. No, the sound that followed was not a scream. It was a collapse, like a room imploding inward. The pressure vanished so suddenly I nearly fell. The city noise rushed back in full force. I stood there shaking, surrounded by strangers who had seen nothing but a man talking to his phone. My phone chimed, recording saved. Days passed, no messages came. Weeks passed, sleep returned in careful fragments, always with lights on, always with sound nearby. The city felt different now, lighter, sometimes in reflections. I thought I saw someone watching from far away, curious, hungry, but never close. If you are hearing this now, know one thing: do not sleep alone. If you ever feel watched when you close your eyes, stay awake. Someone like me might be listening. The story ends here. Thank you for watching and listening to the whole story. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to listen to the next story.